On my 30th birthday, I stumbled upon something I never expected. Grayson Vaughn was a VIP client at Hermes, yet the gray handbag he handed me that night was the very first one he had ever given me. After a quiet dinner together, he suddenly took my hand and led me into a luxury boutique, his eyes warm as he insisted I pick something I liked. I had always thought designer handbags were overpriced for nothing more than the label, but the way he looked at me that night softened something inside. It felt sweet, almost tender, until the cashier greeted him by name and confirmed his VIP status. I wasn't the type to chase after luxury goods, but anyone familiar with Hermes knew the truth. To be a VIP, you had to spend at least $1 million a year. I certainly hadn't, and Grayson wasn't the sort who seemed obsessed with such extravagance either. So how had he achieved that status? And more importantly, for whom was he buying all of this? He told me flatly that in his line of work, gifting high-end items to clients was common practice. I wanted to ask more, but his patience ran out quickly. He tossed the handbag onto the sofa, lit a cigarette with irritation, then caught sight of my slightly rounded belly and extinguished it with a sigh. "Natalie," he said in a voice both weary and clipped. "I'm exhausted too. The company has a lot going on. Don't overthink things. It's not good for the baby." So he did remember I was pregnant. We were expecting our second child, and yet he could still speak to me like this. 10 years of knowing each other, 9 years of building a life together, countless storms weathered side by side, and this was how he reacted. Instead of calming my fears, his sudden anger only solidified the gnawing suspicion that something in our marriage was deeply wrong. We had built the company together from the ground up. Every expense had always been recorded, every transaction transparent. Gifts for clients were categorized under hospitality expenses. All I had to do was review the company's Hermes purchases for the year to see the truth. Though I'd stepped back from daily operations in recent years to care for our son, I still had influence. It didn't take long for one of the junior accountants to send me a detailed list of hospitality purchases spanning the last few years. Scrolling slowly, I saw that Hermes items had been rare in the past. We had favored premium wine, imported cigars, fine teas, or gift cards for clients. But beginning in June, there was a sudden spike in Hermes orders. At first glance, it lined up with Grayson's explanation scarves, tableware perfume, and a couple of entry-level handbags. But when I tallied it all, the total fell far short of the threshold for VIP status. A chill seeped into my bones as I stared at the figures. I had believed we were a happy family of 3, but maybe that belief had been nothing more than a comfortable illusion. 2 days later, Grayson called me, his voice sharp with anger. "Natalie, you checked up on me. You really think so little of me?" The ice in my chest spread deeper. If he hadn't reacted with such agitation, maybe I could have convinced myself I was being paranoid. But the defensiveness, the edge in his tone, made me certain I was right to be suspicious. My nails dug into my palm, but I felt no pain, only the thudding of my pulse. In a voice deceptively light, I asked, "Checked up on you, why would I ever doubt you?" He paused for a few seconds before replying, his tone cooler now. "Then why go through the company's records? Nothing better to do at home, nothing better to do." As if the years I'd spent holding our family together while he built his empire meant nothing. As if stepping back from the company to raise our child had made me some idle, purposeless woman. His words stung more than I let him hear, but they also gave me something else resolve. If there was truth hidden here, I was going to find it. I never imagined that one day the man who once built a life and a business with me would use those words to describe me. When our son was born, I never intended to step away from my work. But when Evan turned 3, then 4, the fevers came more often. He would cling to my shirt with his tiny hands, eyes brimming with tears, begging me not to leave. My heart softened every single time. I wanted to be there for him, to give him the comfort only a mother could, and I wanted to make sure that Grayson and I were not just 2 people living parallel, hectic lives. So I gradually stepped back from my career, devoting myself to building a stable home where he could focus on his ambitions without worry. But just a few short years later, in his eyes, I had somehow become idle, someone who had nothing important to do. My hand trembled slightly as I held my phone, suppressing the storm rising inside me. I asked calmly why I couldn't review the company's financial records. Was the business his alone? What was wrong with me checking the books? Why did that suddenly mean I was accusing him of something, or was it because he had something to hide? Grayson cut me off instantly, his voice sharp with irritation. Hide what, Natalie? Have you been taking something lately? You've been imagining things all day, and I don't know how to deal with you anymore. His words came fast, laced with reproach, before he sighed and tried to sound defeated. If you want to check, then check. It's your right. And then without another word, he hung up. What I didn't expect was that later that afternoon, a large bouquet of pale pink roses arrived at my door. He said he'd been too busy lately to pay attention to me. I stared at the flowers, flown in fresh with dewdrops still clinging to the petals, and felt a bitter taste rise in my chest. He had always told me he didn't believe in such empty romantic gestures, that life was about groceries bills and hard work, not frivolous displays. In all our years together, he never once bought me flowers unless I asked, and even then, it was reluctant. At first, I told myself it was because money was tight. But as time went on, I began to wonder if it was simply because he didn't think I was worth the effort. And now, after all this time, he was suddenly buying me roses, only to calm me down, to keep me from discovering his affair. The expensive Hermes bag from last week flashed in my mind. Was that also guilt money? Had he bought too many gifts for her and in a moment of conscience decided to throw one my way to keep me quiet? That night, the house felt unbearably empty. The home where the three of us had lived for years seemed colder than ever. The housekeeper had left after preparing dinner. Evan was staying at my sister's and hadn't come home for several days. Grayson called to ask if I had eaten, his voice carrying that familiar, almost scripted concern. Nat, don't overthink things. It's not good for the baby. Then he added, when I'm done with work, I'll make it up to you. I didn't answer. I set the phone down on the table and got up to turn up the heat. Maybe the house was simply too big, its spaces too empty, and that was why the cold seeped in no matter how high the thermostat climbed. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had dinner with my husband or my son. Evan seemed to prefer my sister's place these days, choosing to spend his winter break there without even asking to come home. It struck me as strange. Years ago, when Grayson and I were living in a cramped 10-square-meter apartment, I had never once felt lonely. We didn't dare turn on the air conditioning in the summer or the heat in the winter, but somehow, as long as we held each other, it felt like we could survive anything. Now, in this large, polished house, I had never felt more alone. Grayson's voice suddenly rose through the phone, edged with concern. Nat, are you listening to me? I stood there in front of the heating system, waiting for the warmth to spread through the room, yet the emptiness inside me remained untouched. Through the faint static of the line, his voice came again, this time, almost frantic. Nat, what's wrong? Say something. I drew in a deep breath, steadying myself. Nothing, I'm just tired. That's all. My voice was flat, drained. He rushed to speak as if afraid of losing his chance to explain. You scared me half to death. But I couldn't listen anymore. I hung up before he could say anything else. If he truly cared, if he truly loved me, would he have done these things when I was carrying his child? How could a person change so easily, so completely? In this world, who was left for me to trust? My eyes drifted to the shelf in the living room where Evan's Ultraman figures stood in perfect rows, untouched. I reached out and ran my fingers over the cold plastic, remembering how he used to make up long, elaborate battles for them in the middle of the living room floor. The silence pressed against my ears, heavy and suffocating. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the flowers and the bag weren't gifts, they were apologies he didn't have the courage to say out loud. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, but the realization that I had been slowly erased from the center of his life, replaced by someone else without even noticing when it happened. I thought back to those early days when our dreams were small, but our faith in each other was unshakable. We had built everything together, brick by brick, enduring setbacks, celebrating victories, always believing that as long as we were side by side, nothing could tear us apart. But now, standing alone in the dim glow of the living room, I realized that the person I had built my life with was no longer the same man I married. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the same woman anymore either. Suddenly, a sharp ache tore through my chest as I thought about Dylan. He was the child I had carried for 10 long months, my own flesh and blood, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world, aside from Grayson. Without another thought, I opened my closet, pulled on a heavy coat, grabbed my car keys, and drove off to pick him up. Ever since my pregnancy, I had been easily exhausted and preferred staying at home. It had been more than 6 months since I last visited my sister Melissa. She seemed surprised when she opened the door and saw me standing there. Dylan was in the living room, slouched on the couch with a game controller in his hands, completely absorbed in whatever he was playing. The sight made my blood boil. Dylan, how long have you been at this? Have you been glued to that game every single day lately? My voice rose without meaning to. He didn't even move from his spot. He just tilted his head back slightly. His eyes filled with irritation as he looked at me. Mom, you're so annoying. It's winter break. Can't I just relax? Or do I not even have that freedom? That was my child, my precious boy for whom I had risked half my life to bring into this world, speaking to me in that tone with that look. I knew his eyesight had been showing early signs of nearsightedness, which was why I had been strict about limiting his screen time. But at that moment, the frustration roared inside me like a wildfire, stealing my breath. Was this house really going to keep spiraling like this, from the adults to the children, Dylan? Come here right now, I barked, my voice hard. Who am I to you? Is this the way you talk to your mother? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his back to me and continued his game as if I didn't exist. Before I could react, Melissa stepped between us, her voice calm but patronizing. Natalie, he's just a kid. Why bother arguing with him? Children have their own rights too. I turned to look at her, ready to snap back, but then I caught the way Dylan was looking at her like she was his safe place, his real guardian. The dependency in his eyes made my stomach twist with discomfort, as if something was deeply wrong, but I couldn't yet put it into words. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down, deciding to take Dylan home and deal with this there. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye in the corner of the living room, a massive glass display case. I froze. It was the kind of frosted glass cabinet you'd see in luxury boutiques, filled with a stunning collection of Hermes handbags. I stared at it in disbelief before turning my gaze on Melissa. Shock, curiosity, and a creeping sense of unease swirled inside me. Melissa avoided my eyes, rubbing her arm in a subtle, nervous gesture. They're gifts from my boyfriend, she said almost too quickly. My mind flashed to the fact that Grayson had recently signed an exclusive deal with Hermes. A cold, prickling thought took root in my chest. Melissa's voice broke into my thoughts, a touch defensive now. He insisted on giving them to me. Our eyes met, and for a split second, I caught something flickering in hers. Part smug satisfaction, part unspoken challenge. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was just my paranoia. Still, the alarm bells inside me wouldn't stop ringing. I forced my expression to stay neutral. How long have you known him? I asked. Not that long, she replied. So why not introduce him to the family? I pressed. She stiffened for a moment, then smiled thinly. No need. Does he have a wife? I asked bluntly. Melissa's head snapped up, her tone sharp and accusing. What are you implying, Natalie? Are you out of your mind? I didn't answer. Instead, I calmly pulled out my phone and began taking photos of each bag in that gleaming cabinet. It's just a joke. Don't get so worked up, I said lightly, adjusting the angle so every single handbag was in the frame. Still, my hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. Who would joke about something like this? Melissa scowled, clearly irritated. What are you taking these for? She asked, her curiosity piqued. I forced a smile. I've never seen anyone as wealthy as you. Thought I'd take notes. Go ahead, take as many as you want. But don't tell me Grayson hasn't bought you any. Your company's doing well, isn't it? She said with a smirk. My lips curved into a faint, dismissive smile. Who else would buy them for me if not him? Melissa ducked her head at that, but I didn't miss it. Not the faint, satisfied smile. Not the way she avoided my eyes. In that fleeting moment when she bent down, the corner of her lips curved into a sweet smile she couldn't hide. My heart clenched, as if an invisible hand had seized it, each breath tightening with a suffocating ache. I didn't dare think too much, but every tiny detail, every unusual glance from Laura, combined with the unshakable instinct rising within me, all screamed at me to face the truth. Just a little more, I thought. Just one more piece of proof, and I could rip away the veil covering everything. I couldn't stay there any longer. Even pretending to act normal was exhausting. I slipped my phone into my purse, turned to Evan and said, Evan, we're going home. I don't want to go. You can go alone, he snapped. My tone had already grown sharper, but as if he wanted to challenge me, my son suddenly bolted, running behind Laura and wrapping his arms tightly around her arm. His voice rose in defiance. Why does everything have to be the way you say? Why can't Aunt Laura be my mom instead of you? The innocent, high-pitched voice of a child cut into me like a blade. I reached out to pull him back, but Laura stepped between us. With that same calm, gentle tone she always used, she said, "Natalie, why are you arguing with a child?" Evan clung to her side, his eyes toward me, filled with disdain and impatience. A chill seeped deep into my chest, and I could no longer remember how I left her apartment. By the time I returned home, my body felt drained of every ounce of strength, my heart tearing apart piece by piece. But I couldn't run away. I refused to live like a fool kept in the dark. Grayson could have betrayed me with anyone, but why? Why did it have to be Laura? She was my own sister. I decided to download a few of the banking apps Grayson often used. I had once checked his WeChat transaction records while he was sleeping. Maybe he was confident I'd never find anything because, before his last business trip, he had even handed me his phone with a casual smile saying, "Natalie, you can check anytime you want as long as it makes you feel better." But he didn't know that any woman betrayed in her marriage is naturally born a detective. Text messages can be deleted, transactions on WeChat can be hidden, but bank statements never lie. Grayson hated inconvenience. Every card he used had been registered and set up by me years ago. He had even complained that the banking apps cluttered his phone, so he had deleted them all long ago. It only took me a few minutes to log in and search through the statements. The entire collection of Hermes bags sitting in Laura's apartment suddenly had an answer. My legs gave out and I sank onto the sofa, my entire body trembling. It was true. It had always been true. How could they dare? I stayed in bed for an entire day and night, not moving. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Whitaker, worried about me, called Laura, knowing my mother was away on a trip, and Grayson was still out of town for work. Soon Laura walked into my room, carrying a bowl of vegetable porridge from the kitchen. Her voice was soft, filled with feigned concern. "Natalie, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" I said nothing, only staring at her in silence. My gaze seemed to unsettle her. She lifted her hand to her cheek and asked awkwardly, "Is there something on my face?" I rose from the bed, walked straight to her, and without hesitation slapped her hard across the face. She looked at me in shock, but before she could react, I struck her again twice more until her cheek was swollen and the corner of her lip bled. "Laura," I screamed, my voice breaking. "How could you do this? What did I ever do to you? Do you even have a conscience?" I grabbed her arms, shaking her as if I could tear the truth from her. For just a moment, her eyes flickered with guilt, but it vanished quickly. She straightened, touched her cheek, and met my gaze with unnerving calm. "So you finally know," she said coldly. "I've been waiting for this. I'm done hiding. I'm done living in the shadows. I had even wished for the day you would come to pick up your own son, so you could finally piece together the truth. Natalie, do you know? Love is something you can't force. Love can't be forced. At this point, you can still say something so shameless." My hand shot up, ready to slap her again, but this time she caught my wrist, her grip tight, her voice cold. "How long are you planning to keep hitting me? I am still your sister. You know you're my sister. Do you even remember how I treated you? And do you remember how you treated me? When I was 15, I dropped out of school so you could continue yours. Is this how you repay me?" "Enough!" Miranda's voice rose in anger. "How many more times are you going to bring that up? Who forced you to do it? You chose it yourself, didn't you?" "I didn't hold a knife to your throat. Chose it myself back then. Our father was working far away when he cheated and abandoned our family for another woman. Our mother had to raise 2 children alone. You were failing school but obsessed with art, and we didn't even have enough money for daily expenses. You slit your own wrist and used your death as a weapon, telling us that if you couldn't study art, life would have no meaning and you'd rather die. I saw our mother collapse to the ground, begging me to save you, to save this family. She pleaded with me to think of our family first. I was young then, naive. The responsibility and guilt adults placed on me made me keep giving in step by step until I had surrendered my own future. I thought they were everything, my family, my most beloved people. So with just a few soft words, I was convinced to leave school, to work in a sewing factory, to carry the burden of our home. For 5 long years, except for the bare minimum I needed to survive, every cent I earned went back to them. Back then, Miranda promised she would never forget my sacrifice. She told me that once she graduated, she would work and pay for me to go back to school. But what happened? Her ambitions grew bigger. She told me to wait, and then to wait again. After college, she wanted a master's degree. After her master's, she wanted to study abroad. My chance to return to school had turned into a cruel joke. And now she has the nerve to tell me I chose it freely, that no one forced me, that no knife was pressed to my throat. The fury in me threatened to explode, but I had nowhere to release it. I yanked my wrist from her grip, turned and grabbed the glass desk lamp from my nightstand, hurling it straight at her head. The crystal-clear shade shattered instantly, scattering shards across the floor. Blood streamed from her forehead, the sharp scent of iron filling the room. "Natalie, are you insane?" She clutched her wound, staring at me in disbelief. I didn't answer. I grabbed the lamp again and threw it at her once more. This time she dodged, but it still smashed into her arm, making her cry out in pain. She raised her hand, ready to strike back, but Mrs. Whitaker rushed in, holding her tightly to stop her. Seizing the moment, I tore her handbag from her grasp and shouted through my tears for Mrs. Whitaker to get her out of the room immediately. The housekeeper must have guessed what was going on because she pretended not to notice my actions and pulled Miranda toward the door. She said in a rushed voice, "Natalie's pregnant. We can't let anything happen to her. If there's a problem, talk it out later. And she has the right to hurt me," Miranda shouted, her voice thick with resentment. "Then what did you do to make her this upset?" Mrs. Whitaker shot back as she dragged her away. The moment the door slammed shut, I locked it. Their voices outside were muffled now, unable to reach me. My hands trembled as I pulled Miranda's phone from her purse, trying to unlock it. All the messages from Grayson Vaughn had been deleted, but I doubted Miranda had done that herself. She just had a poor memory. Her passwords were always either her birthday or her own phone number. The screen lit up, and a flood of messages appeared line after line, stabbing into my already shattered heart, trampling on the last shreds of dignity I had left. I scrolled through them, each word like another knife. By the end, I could barely breathe. It turned out they had once been lovers. It turned out that because Miranda had an abortion for Grayson and could no longer have children, she felt unworthy of him, so she had introduced me to him instead. But now she regretted it. As she got older, the loneliness had begun to gnaw at her, making her crave a happy family, making her long for the warmth of reunion. What was I to them? Was I nothing more than a gift Miranda Vaughn had handed over to Grayson? And as for Grayson, had he agreed to that arrangement because he felt guilty toward her? Was that why, after she returned from abroad, he chose to accompany her to make it up to her? They sat there right in front of my eyes, reminiscing about the past, tangled in a web of unspoken intimacy. How could I have been so blind? A message from the week before my birthday suddenly caught my attention. That day was the very one I had scheduled my prenatal checkup. Grayson told me there was an urgent matter at the company, something he couldn't resolve in time. I understood, told him to go, and went to the hospital alone. In truth, I was spotting that day, but I put my own well-being last, convincing myself that we were a family, a united whole, and that his work was for the sake of this home. But reality was cruel. While I was sitting in that sterile hospital room, he was at Miranda's place, wrapped around her in pleasure. Afterward, he had the nerve to ask if she'd taken birth control. Her answer was a dagger to my heart. "Don't you already know if I need to?" And then, as if on instinct, he rushed to buy her designer handbags and jewelry to soothe her. If he kept going at that rate, he'd soon be Hermes' most valued client. That elephant gray bag I once thought was too extravagant for me, apparently, wasn't even good enough to gather dust in her closet. Because in his eyes, she deserved the very best. She was worthy of the rarest, most precious things. And me, I was the one to be dismissed, trampled on, deceived, and ultimately destroyed. I sat there on the floor just outside the door, the weight of the truth crushing me. It turned out that what I had always believed was happiness was nothing more than a ridiculous dream, a shimmering illusion that had never been real. My tears had run dry, but reason still whispered that I needed to keep the evidence. I took screenshots, recorded videos, saved every disgusting message between them. Every time I read them, it tore me open all over again. Outside, Miranda grew impatient, pounding on the door, shouting for me to give her phone back, accusing me of violating her privacy. Mrs. Whitaker, who had initially tried to pull Miranda away, began knocking softly, instead her voice trembling with concern. "Natalie, don't do anything reckless. No matter how bad it seems, it will pass. You have to stay calm, don't hurt yourself." I wanted to answer her, but even forming words felt like it would drain the last of my strength. My throat constricted, and at last I managed to whisper hoarsely, "Mrs. Whitaker, I'm fine. Don't worry, I just need a moment alone." All right, she said gently. I won't push. I've made chicken soup and porridge. If you need anything, call me and I'll bring it up. It was bitterly ironic at this moment the only person who truly cared about me was someone who shared no blood with me at all. When I had gathered all the evidence I needed, I was completely drained. I lay flat on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming uncontrollably down my cheeks. I hated them both. But more than that, I hated myself. Hated how foolish I had been, hated that it had taken me years to see the truth. I didn't know how much time had passed when I heard Evan crying outside. Mom, I fell off a horse today, my leg hurts so bad. Can you come see? A mother's instinct is to answer her child's call. I wiped my tears quickly, forcing my voice steady, and opened the door. But before I could even reach for him, Evan darted past me, snatched up Miranda's bag and phone, and ran to her like an eager little bird, bringing treasure to its nest. Here, Aunt Miranda, he chirped, grinning. I got your things back. I froze watching the scene unfold, Miranda's eyes meeting mine with open defiance. Evan's small arms wrapped tightly around her waist. His gaze toward me brimmed with resentment, as if I were the intruder destroying their family. My mind roared, heat rushing to my face. I no longer cared about appearances. I lunged forward, grabbed Miranda's hair, and yanked hard. You're enjoying yourself, aren't you? Is your shamelessness bottomless? Not only did you steal my husband, but… Before I could finish, I was shoved hard, my body slamming against the corner of a cabinet. Pain exploded in my abdomen, radiating outward like fire. I doubled over, trembling violently, but the agony in my body was nothing compared to the splintering of my heart, because the one who had pushed me wasn't Miranda. It was Evan, my own son. The child I had carried for 10 long months, sacrificing my health and my youth to bring into this world, had just struck me down. Evan stood in front of Miranda like a loyal guard, his small body blocking my path, as he shouted at me with a trembling voice, I won't let you hurt her. I clenched my teeth, my eyes burning with a pain that seemed to pierce through my soul. And if I have to touch her, Evan, what will you do to your own mother? His face twisted with defiance. I'll fight you with everything I have. He raised the riding crop I had once bought for him, his little hands gripping it tightly, the leather glinting under the light. The sound of it slicing through the air as he swung it toward me made my heart stop. In that moment, I felt as though I had already died. This was the child I had carried for 10 long months. The child I had nearly lost my life, bringing into this world, now raising his hand against me for the sake of a woman who had destroyed our family. That riding crop was not just a piece of leather and wood, it was something I had picked out for him after an entire afternoon together, along with a bright red miniature saddle. He had once told me he wanted to ride a horse, his eyes sparkling with excitement, as he spoke about a majestic chestnut stallion owned by someone at the stables. But that horse was too big for him, and I had worked tirelessly to arrange for a smaller, gentle chestnut pony to be brought from another city. I wanted to surprise him for his 8th birthday. That day he hugged me so tightly, his little arms wrapped around my neck, whispering, Mom, I love you so much. No one in this world will ever be as good to me as you are. Yet here we were just months later, and that same child was willing to use the very gift I had given him to hurt me. He never did strike me in the end, not because he changed his mind, but because Mrs. Whitaker rushed in and threw herself between us. Still, the blow that never landed might as well have struck straight into my heart. My knees buckled, the room swayed, and a hot rush of fluid streamed down my legs. The riding crop slipped from Evan's hand as he burst into tears. I didn't mean it. It's just… You hurt Miranda first. You were wrong first. Mrs. Whitaker clutched me with trembling hands. Natalie, what's happening? Oh God, please don't scare me like this. She turned sharply toward Miranda. Call an ambulance now. But Miranda fumbled, her hands shaking so badly she could not even find her phone. In the end, Mrs. Whitaker laid me gently on the floor, her voice urgent as she made the call herself. The pain came in waves, but oddly it began to feel distant, as if my body was shutting down. My mind grew foggy, but my hearing sharpened. I could hear the wind whistling outside the window, each gust colder than the last. Why was it so cold this winter? Felt like it was cutting through bone. At the hospital, the doctor's words fell like stones. My baby was gone. I stared at the ceiling, unsure of what I was supposed to feel. Maybe for that child it was a kind of release. I lay there like an empty shell, my spirit drained away, only vaguely aware of Mrs. Whitaker sitting by my bed, dabbing my forehead with a damp cloth, her eyes red. She tried to comfort me. Natalie, life is long and there is no pain you cannot survive. Do not lose yourself to despair. Do not let this break you. A nurse arrived with a small tray of my Femstone and estradiol. The pregnancy had been under 3 months, so medication was the only option to expel the fetus. If it was not complete, I would need a surgical procedure. I swallowed the pills, and within a day, the nausea began. My stomach churned violently, my head spinning, my body too weak to even lift itself from the bed. Mrs. Whitaker brought warm porridge, urging me to eat, but every mouthful scraped against my throat like tiny thorns. I forced down a few spoonfuls, only to bring it all back up moments later. By nightfall, the cramps began. They were sharp, twisting pains that came in relentless waves, each one tearing at my insides until my vision blurred with tears. Mrs. Whitaker reached for a hot compress to soothe me, but the nurse stopped her, warning that it could worsen the bleeding. So I curled into myself on the hospital bed, drenched in sweat, my hair plastered to my face, my body trembling from exhaustion. The cramps felt like a furious serpent coiling tighter and tighter inside me, or like unseen hands wringing my insides until they could wring no more. When the pain grew unbearable, they gave me an injection. It dulled the agony for a few minutes, but the relief came with a cruel side effect: stronger contractions. The cycle of pain returned sharper than before, dragging me through the night. Near dawn, Mrs. Whitaker helped me to the bathroom. That was when the final wave came, and the small, fragile life I had been carrying slipped away, followed by dark, heavy clots. I felt my heart plummet into an endless abyss. And then from the room next door came the sound of a newborn's first cry, clear, loud, and full of life. My knees buckled. Mrs. Whitaker caught me before I fell, holding me close. My eyes burned and overflowed, the sobs ripping from my chest as I buried my face in her shoulder. My baby. If not for all of this, my baby might have been born too. My baby might have cried out in that same voice, breathing in the cold winter air for the very first time. I slept like someone who had been emptied out. And when I finally surfaced, Mrs. Whitaker was there, with warm porridge, the steam curling in the lamplight, like a quiet prayer I could not answer. My phone buzzed with messages from Grayson, the same careful lines he always sent when he wanted to sound devoted. "Have you eaten? Is your stomach hurting? Do you need me to come home?" He must not have known yet that the baby was gone. I asked Mrs. Whitaker not to tell him. I was afraid that if I saw his face, if I heard one more careful word slide off his tongue, I would drag him into the same darkness that had swallowed me whole. I was too tired to scream and too tired to curse. I powered the phone off and let the silence fold over me. After 3 days in the hospital, I returned home with Mrs. Whitaker. At noon, she went out to buy a chicken, saying she would make soup the way my mother never learned to make. I lay on the sofa, and my eyes drifted across the room to the place where I had been pushed. The stain was still there on the rug. A dark bruise pressed into the fibers, and for a moment I convinced myself that all of this had been a dream. Then the front door opened hard against the stop, and a gust of cold air came barreling in, slicing through my bones, and waking me up completely. Grayson stood in the doorway, eyes red, moving toward me in slow steps, like a man approaching a cliff he had built with his own hands. "Natalie," he said, breath-catching, "I just found out." He searched for words, tripping over them, reaching for explanations that would make him noble. I rose and slapped him across the face. He did not raise a hand to block it. He only said, "I am sorry," and that he never expected things to become like this. I laughed because the sound was the only thing that felt real. "You did not expect to end up in Miranda's bed. You did not expect to tear off your clothes for her again and again. You did not expect me to notice. Do you even remember who she is to me?" His name caught in my throat like a thorn. "From the beginning, you knew she was my sister," I said, "and you went ahead anyway. What do you take me for? Some fool you could keep in the dark forever." He tried to reshape the story with that soft, steady voice I had once found beautiful. "It is not what you think. No one spends 10 years to play a trick. Only real love lasts that long." He reached for me and I jerked away as if I had touched a live wire. "Do not touch me. You make me sick. You both make me sick." He said he had been wrong, but not in the way I imagined. He said he only felt guilty for her. He only wanted to make it up to her. I repeated his words and they tasted like ash. To make it up to her, you climbed into her bed. To make it up to her, you lived beside me like a penitent and used my blood and body to bring a child into a world where you were already writing a better love story for someone else. His face went slack. The child. He said it like he had never seen a child before. Are you still pretending? I asked. Do you need me to help you perform a grand romance so moving the world will forgive you? Tears burned hot and cold as I threw the words. You are a monster, Grayson. The child I carried, the child I would have died to protect. What was that to you? A piece of property for you and Miranda to name and pity. Was it not her dream painting in a meadow that you worshipped? Because she could not bear a child, she called the painting her spirit child, and you named our son in the same image to ease your guilt and to carve me out of my own family. What gave you the right? What am I to you? Are you even human anymore? He begged for a chance. He said, let me explain. He took my wrist in both hands, eyes wild and unfocused. I tore free and shouted again not to touch me. He would not stop. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I felt his tears slide down my neck as his voice cracked. If you need to hurt me, he said, do it. If you need to kill me, I accept it. Revulsion rose like heat. I twisted and could not break his hold. He was stronger, and he held on like a drowning man who has found a plank. I lowered my head and bit his forearm where the sweater left skin exposed. He shouted and loosened his grip. I stumbled to the coffee table, grabbed the small fruit knife with the cheap wooden handle, turned, and drove it straight at him. The blade went in beneath his rib, and his face went white at once. There is a particular silence when metal meets flesh. Years ago, when we were poor, I helped my mother slaughter a sick pig because there was no money and no other meat. The sensation was the same, and the memory made me dizzy. Grayson stared at me with a shock that looked almost innocent. Then his knees buckled. He tried to speak, but pain chewed his words into fragments. He clutched my legs like they were the last solid thing left in his world, and said my name in a ragged whisper. If you want to finish it, do it. I will not run. I will not stop you. I raised the knife again, and he slid away across the floor, leaving a thin smear that made me want to scream. I followed because I was not a person anymore, only a pulse of fury and grief, wearing the shape of a woman who had lost too much. The second strike glanced along his arm, and he cried out, the sound bursting against the walls like a flock of trapped birds. I could hear my breath tearing at my lungs. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the heat clank, and the faint traffic far below the window, and I could not hear my own heart. He kept backing up, and I kept coming until there was nowhere left to go. The room tilted, then steadied. He said my name again, almost pleading. I saw the man I had once loved, the one who held my hand in a $10 apartment when we were too broke to run the heater, and we kept each other warm until the sun rose. I saw the liar who had worshipped my sister like a secret altar, and laid our life upon it as an offering. Both men were there, woven into one face. I lowered the knife and then raised it again because I could not decide which face I was looking at. The front door banged, and I heard Mrs. Whitaker call my name. She was back with the chicken, the bag thumping against her leg as she hurried through the hall. She stopped cold when she saw us on the floor, and for a second we were all suspended in a stillness so complete that I could feel the air settle on my skin. Put the knife down, she said in a voice that did not shake. Come to me, Natalie. Come now. Her certainty cut through the noise in my head. I looked at Grayson, who had pressed his palm against his side and was breathing in short, sharp pulls. Then I looked at my hand. The knife felt small and ridiculous, as if the tool could carry the weight of everything that had happened. I set it on the table. The sound was barely a click, but it was the loudest sound in the room. Mrs. Whitaker moved between us, her eyes never leaving mine. Sit, she said, and I sat. She dialed for help and told them there had been an accident, and that someone was bleeding, and that I was pregnant, though that was no longer true. She did not correct herself. She told me to breathe with her, and I did. In and out, slow, again, as if breath were something you could learn after forgetting it. Grayson leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. He whispered that he was sorry, and I believed that he was. But sorrow is cheap when it comes too late. Sirens grew from a far-off thread into a sound that filled the room. In the hallway, lights flickered and settled. I watched Mrs. Whitaker's hands as she pressed a clean towel against his side. I watched the door. I watched my own knees, which had begun to shake. Outside the window, a strip of winter sky showed through the buildings, a color that could not decide if it was blue or white. I felt empty and also unbearably heavy, as if grief were its own gravity, and I was the only planet caught inside it. I thought of the child who would not be born of the stain on the rug of the cabinet full of handbags that were not mine. I thought of my son and the riding crop that never fell and still managed to strike the center of me. The world narrowed to breath and the steady voice of a woman who had chosen to stand with me. Help was on the way. The rest would come after. I slept like someone who had been emptied out, and when I finally surfaced, Mrs. Whitaker was there with warm porridge, the steam curling in the lamplight, like a quiet prayer I could not answer. My phone buzzed with messages from Grayson, the same careful lines he always sent when he wanted to sound devoted. Have you eaten? Is your stomach hurting? Do you need me to come home? He must not have known yet that the baby was gone. I asked Mrs. Whitaker not to tell him. I was afraid that if I saw his face, if I heard one more careful word slide off his tongue, I would drag him into the same darkness that had swallowed me whole. I was too tired to scream and too tired to curse. I powered the phone off and let the silence fold over me. After 3 days in the hospital, I returned home with Mrs. Whitaker. At noon, she went out to buy a chicken, saying she would make soup the way my mother never learned to make. I lay on the sofa and my eyes drifted across the room to the place where I had been pushed. The stain was still there on the rug, a dark bruise pressed into the fibers, and for a moment I convinced myself that all of this had been a dream. Then the front door opened hard against the stop, and a gust of cold air came barreling in, slicing through my bones and waking me up completely. Grayson stood in the doorway, eyes red, moving toward me in slow steps like a man approaching a cliff he had built with his own hands. "Natalie," he said, breath-catching, "I just found out." He searched for words, tripping over them, reaching for explanations that would make him noble. I rose and slapped him across the face. He did not raise a hand to block it. He only said, "I am sorry," and that he never expected things to become like this. I laughed because the sound was the only thing that felt real. You did not expect to end up in Miranda's bed. You did not expect to tear off your clothes for her again and again. You did not expect me to notice. Do you even remember who she is to me? His name caught in my throat like a thorn. From the beginning you knew she was my sister, I said. And you went ahead anyway. What do you take me for? Some fool you could keep in the dark forever. He tried to reshape the story with that soft, steady voice I had once found beautiful. It is not what you think. No one spends 10 years to play a trick. Only real love lasts that long. He reached for me and I jerked away as if I had touched a live wire. Do not touch me. You make me sick. You both make me sick. He said he had been wrong, but not in the way I imagined. He said he only felt guilty for her. He only wanted to make it up to her. I repeated his words and they tasted like ash. To make it up to her, you climbed into her bed. To make it up to her, you lived beside me like a penitent and used my blood and body to bring a child into a world where you were already writing a better love story for someone else. His face went slack. The child? He said it like he had never seen a child before. Are you still pretending? I asked. Do you need me to help you perform a grand romance so moving the world will forgive you? Tears burned hot and cold as I threw the words. You are a monster, Grayson. The child I carried, the child. I would have died to protect what was that to you. A piece of property for you and Miranda to name and pity. Was it not her dream painting in a meadow that you worshipped? Because she could not bear a child, she called the painting her spirit child. And you named our son in the same image to ease your guilt and to carve me out of my own family. What gave you the right? What am I to you? Are you even human anymore? He begged for a chance. He said, let me explain. He took my wrist in both hands, eyes wild and unfocused. I tore free and shouted again not to touch me. He would not stop. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I felt his tears slide down my neck as his voice cracked. If you need to hurt me, he said, do it. If you need to kill me, I accept it. Revulsion rose like heat. I twisted and could not break his hold. He was stronger, and he held on like a drowning man who has found a plank. I lowered my head and bit his forearm, where the sweater left skin exposed. He shouted and loosened his grip. I stumbled to the coffee table, grabbed the small fruit knife with the cheap wooden handle turned, and drove it straight at him. The blade went in beneath his rib, and his face went white at once. There is a particular silence when metal meets flesh. Years ago, when we were poor, I helped my mother slaughter a sick pig because there was no money and no other meat. The sensation was the same, and the memory made me dizzy. Grayson stared at me with a shock that looked almost innocent, then his knees buckled. He tried to speak, but pain chewed his words into fragments. He clutched my legs like they were the last solid thing left in his world, and said my name in a ragged whisper. If you want to finish it, do it. I will not run. I will not stop you. I raised the knife again, and he slid away across the floor, leaving a thin smear that made me want to scream. I followed because I was not a person anymore. Only a pulse of fury and grief, wearing the shape of a woman who had lost too much. The second strike glanced along his arm, and he cried out, the sound bursting against the walls like a flock of trapped birds. I could hear my breath tearing at my lungs. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the heat clank and the faint traffic far below the window, and I could not hear my own heart. He kept backing up, and I kept coming until there was nowhere left to go. The room tilted, then steadied. He said my name again, almost pleading. I saw the man I had once loved, the one who held my hand in a $10 apartment when we were too broke to run the heater, and we kept each other warm until the sun rose. I saw the liar who had worshipped my sister like a secret altar and laid our life upon it as an offering. Both men were there, woven into one face. I lowered the knife and then raised it again because I could not decide which face I was looking at. The front door banged, and I heard Mrs. Whitaker call my name. She was back with the chicken, the bag thumping against her leg as she hurried through the hall. She stopped cold when she saw us on the floor, and for a second we were all suspended in a stillness so complete that I could feel the air settle on my skin. Put the knife down, she said in a voice that did not shake. Come to me, Natalie. Come now. Her certainty cut through the noise in my head. I looked at Grayson, who had pressed his palm against his side and was breathing in short, sharp pulls. Then I looked at my hand. The knife felt small and ridiculous, as if the tool could carry the weight of everything that had happened. I set it on the table. The sound was barely a click, but it was the loudest sound in the room. Mrs. Whitaker moved between us, her eyes never leaving mine. Sit, she said, and I sat. She dialed for help and told them there had been an accident and that someone was bleeding and that I was pregnant, though that was no longer true. She did not correct herself. She told me to breathe with her, and I did. In and out, slow again, as if breath were something you could learn after forgetting it. Grayson leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. He whispered that he was sorry, and I believed that he was. But sorrow is cheap when it comes too late. Sirens grew from a far-off thread into a sound that filled the room. In the hallway, lights flickered and settled. I watched Mrs. Whitaker's hands as she pressed a clean towel against his side. I watched the door. I watched my own knees, which had begun to shake. Outside the window, a strip of winter sky showed through the buildings, a color that could not decide if it was blue or white. I felt empty and also unbearably heavy, as if grief were its own gravity, and I was the only planet caught inside it. I thought of the child who would not be born, of the stain on the rug of the cabinet full of handbags that were not mine. I thought of my son and the riding crop that never fell and still managed to strike the center of me. The world narrowed to breath and the steady voice of a woman who had chosen to stand with me. Help was on the way. The rest would come after. I could see in his eyes that he thought I would never follow through, that I was all noise and no danger. He had no idea how far past the edge I'd already gone. I pulled the knife free, hot blood spraying across my cheek, and without hesitation drove it forward again. This time he stumbled backward, the blade glancing across his arm and leaving a deep, ugly slice that made him groan in pain. Something in me had already snapped. Reason was long gone. All I could see was the betrayal, the years I'd given him, the life he'd burned to ash. I chased him across the room like an animal, knife ready. Each step a vow that I would end this. He must have realized then that I wasn't bluffing, because he bolted, circling the room, his voice breaking as he yelled my name, telling me to calm down, to just listen. Calm down. How could I calm down when everything I had believed in had been gutted in front of me? I shouted back, my voice ragged, and kept after him. The door burst open, cold air flooding the room. Mrs. Whitaker rushed in with someone behind her, and it took me a moment to realize it was Emma Harrington, my closest friend from years ago. I was still standing with the knife in my hand, the metal dripping red, and Grayson was only a few feet away, clutching his side. Emma's voice cut through the chaos, soft but firm, in a way that made me stop moving. Natalie, she said, I'm here now. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you again. She stepped closer, slow and steady, eyes locked on mine. Give me the knife, Nat. Don't let that worthless man take the rest of your life. You've already lost enough. Don't end it like this. Her words landed like a lifeline thrown into deep water, her tears slipping down her face. She reached for the knife, and this time I didn't fight. My fingers went slack, my body giving out all at once, and I collapsed to the floor. She tossed the knife away and pulled the soft scarf from her shoulders, wrapping it around me as if it could hold me together. Then she turned on Grayson, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Get out, now! Unless you want to watch her die in front of you, get out!" He froze, looking like he wanted to speak, but under her glare, nothing came. He pressed his palm to his wound and backed toward the door. Mrs. Whitaker worried he might collapse somewhere, and Twist the Story had already pulled out her phone to call for an ambulance. I stayed in Emma's arms, her embrace fierce and unyielding tears wetting my hair. I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment another minute. Every wall, every corner carried the ghost of a life I thought was real, and now each memory felt like a blade, and Grayson still had a key he could walk back in any time. If he did, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from destroying him piece by piece. Emma and Mrs. Whitaker moved quickly, clearing out her old place and getting it ready for me. Within hours, I was gone from that house for good. Grayson kept calling, but I didn't answer. When he couldn't get to me, he had Liam call instead, his voice flat with reluctance. "Dad told me to call you. If you promise not to hurt her again, then maybe." I hung up before he could finish blocking the number. Maybe my son and I were never meant to be mother and child, not in the way I had hoped. I wasn't going to force it anymore. When my strength began to return, Emma found me a lawyer who specialized in ugly divorces. With her help and the mountain of evidence I'd gathered, I filed the papers without hesitation. The case wasn't difficult, not with the proof I had. But the moment Grayson got his summons, he planted himself outside Emma's building and waited. Hours later, as Mrs. Whitaker and I came back from the market, I saw him standing there. He rushed toward me, his face pale, voice cracking as he said my name. "Natalie, you really want to end this?" What else was there to do? Stay and keep choking on the disgust I felt for him. "Do you hate me that much?" he asked. "That you couldn't even tell me just filed for divorce like I'm nothing to you? Are we really this cold to each other now?" I laughed bitter and sharp. "Do you think I need your permission? This isn't a negotiation. I'm telling you, not asking. This marriage is over, and I'll make sure neither you nor that woman gets a single cent more from me." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The color drained from his face, as if my words had hit him harder than the knife ever had. "You really think I'm that kind of man? You think I've been trying to take advantage of you?" Grayson Vaughn's voice carried a bitter edge. "Oh, isn't that exactly what you've been doing?" I stepped closer to him, every word sharp as the tip of a knife. "Then sign the papers. Sign away every last bit of the assets. You like to make it up to people, right? Then make it up to me. Or is it that in your eyes only Miranda Vaughn is worthy of your compensation? Natalie, is it really just about the money for you? Yes. Right now I need money. Do you dare to give it to me? You can hate me all you want. But don't you care about our son? Evan is your own flesh and blood. My own flesh and blood." I let out a cold laugh. "Oh, so you do remember, he's my son. Take a good look. Do you think he's still mine now? Who does he see as his mother? That's your doing. Are you satisfied? No, you still want to keep playing out this pathetic little charade." I shook my head. "Sorry, I don't have time for your games. If you love money so much, then stop pretending you're above it. Natalie." He clutched at the wound I'd given him, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "If that's what you really want, I'll give it to you. But before this ends, I just need to say one thing. These past 9 years weren't what you think. If I didn't love you, how could I have stayed by your side for 9 years? Really? I almost want to believe that you still had some shred of conscience left, some last scrap of humanity, that you truly loved me once." My voice was ice. "Well then, my attorney has already prepared the agreement for you to sign everything away. When will you have time to put your name on it, Natalie? Must you make this so ugly? Isn't this exactly what you just agreed to? And now it's my fault for taking you at your word. Oh right, I forgot, you've always been a man who breaks his promises. Save it. I'll see you in court." I tugged Mrs. Whitaker toward the door. "All right, fine," he said, suddenly gripping my arm. "If that's what you want, I'll sign right now." "Good. Then we're going straight to the lawyer's office." Without giving him another chance, I drove him there myself. Sienna Harper happened to be at the office already going over the final details of the case with my attorney. On the way, Miranda Vaughn called Grayson, her tone urgent. "Where are you? I'm going to make things right," he replied, voice flat, almost lifeless. I'm giving her everything back. Don't do anything stupid, Miranda shouted over the line. Natalie isn't who you think she is. Don't let her provoke you. You still have me and Evan you need to think about us. I kept driving silent. The audacity she'd already claimed my son as hers in her mind. But she might not live long enough to enjoy it. When the call ended, Grayson stayed quiet for the rest of the ride. Mrs. Whitaker didn't come with us this time. She'd stayed home to prepare dinner. It was just me and him in the car. Once there had been countless times we'd sat together in a car like this. Sometimes he drove, sometimes I did. Back then, our conversations were about how to cut company expenses, land new contracts, manage employees, or how Evan was doing in school. We'd been young, full of hope, and I truly believed that if we worked hard together, the road ahead would be lined with roses. But that dream had been nothing more than a cover for something filthy and contemptible. At a red light, I spoke coldly. Grayson, I hope you've made up your mind. Don't back out once we get there. Everyone's time is valuable. He leaned his head back, eyes closed in weariness. I told you whatever you want, I'll give it to you. I didn't answer, just pressed the gas when the light turned green. In 10 years of knowing him, I'd come to understand his pride better than anyone. The fact that he'd agreed to my demand didn't surprise me, but agreeing was one thing, following through was another. I wanted him to see for himself that his so-called pride was nothing but the last mask covering his deceit. When we arrived, the agreement was already on the table. Sienna had made sure everything was ready. Grayson had barely skimmed the document when Miranda burst in breathless, her face flushed with panic. Grayson, if you sign this, what happens to me? And Evan, Miranda's voice cracked with a mix of worry and desperation. I crossed my arms and let out a dry laugh. Still planning to sign or not? This isn't a stage. Why don't you both go home and keep performing there? Natalie, do you have to talk like this? Grayson asked, his tone heavy. Miranda's only worried about me and Evan, that's all. Grayson furrowed his brows, gearing up for another self-serving speech, but I cut him off coldly. I know exactly how deep your feelings for each other run. I truly couldn't care less. If you're not going to sign, then go. I'll see you in court. Just spare me the theatrics next time. It's pathetic. You think I care about this? He said, grabbing the pen and moving to sign, only for Miranda to grip his arm tightly. Grayson, calm down. Natalie, she sneered, you've always been money hungry. Even as a kid, you'd do anything for money. You just pretend to be noble. I didn't even bother replying. My face stayed cold watching the scene unfold. Sienna Harper, however, wasn't about to sit quietly. She shot up from her chair, her voice ringing out. That's rich coming from a leech who's been living off someone else like a parasite, daring to accuse the woman who kept her afloat of pretending to be noble. If Natalie hadn't been foolish enough to sacrifice for you back then, some lazy deadweight like you, someone who's never lifted a finger, would have ended up selling herself just to survive, instead of playing the self-proclaimed noble mistress you are now. You! Miranda lunged at her, but I grabbed her wrist and held her in place. Sienna didn't let up, her voice dripping with venom. What did I hit a nerve, afraid someone's pointing out that the money you're living off of came from someone else's blood, sweat, and tears? You've sold yourself so many times, it's second nature now. Afraid of being broke? Then go sell yourself again. Once, twice. What's the difference? You're already the other woman. Stop trying to polish your image like some untouched saint. I'll tear your mouth apart. Miranda shrieked, but this time Sienna was faster. She yanked Miranda's hair and delivered a sharp slap across her face. Who exactly are you planning to shut up? You play the homewrecker and still have the audacity to act like the victim. Finally, Grayson stepped in, pulling Miranda behind him. Natalie, can't your friends speak with some decency? Oh, that's rich. You two do filthy things and expect people to talk about you politely. My tone was icy. Sienna's not wrong. You really are a match made in hell. If you don't want to sign, just say so. No need for this performance. At that point, the attorney Sienna had brought in quickly interjected. Ms. Pierce, litigation can be messy. If Mr. Vaughn is open to settlement, perhaps both sides could compromise. The previous agreement might have been a bit too harsh. He turned to Grayson. Mr. Vaughn, I understand Ms. Pierce has been deeply hurt, but I can also see you genuinely want to make amends. We've prepared another agreement. This one allows you to retain a portion of your assets and shares. There's no need to even show it to him, I said. My voice tired. He's only here to put on a show. I don't believe he'll sign. Let's just prepare for court. But as soon as I finished, Grayson took the revised agreement, skimmed a few lines, and ignoring Miranda's loud, tearful protests, signed his name with a firm stroke. 2 copies were signed, and through it all, I didn't utter another word. When he left the office, he took Miranda with him. Before stepping out the door, he glanced back. "Natalie, believe me or not, I still hope you'll live well." I kept my gaze steady, watching their silhouettes disappear, one thought running through my mind, stripped of everything they'd be. Living a life worse than death. Sienna squeezed my hand and whispered, "Good thing this piece of trash still has an ego, the bait worked." Honestly, we never expected him to sign the original agreement. Our real target was the second one. It's reasonable, benefits you, and doesn't push him completely into a corner. Earlier, the attorney had explained that simply proving the husband cheated wouldn't guarantee I'd win a demand for him to walk away with nothing. In cases dividing marital assets, the law tends to favor a 50-50 split. Infidelity, while a violation of the duty to remain faithful, rarely results in one spouse being stripped entirely of their share of the marital assets. That's exactly why Sienna and I used Grayson Vaughn's false pride and arrogance to bait him into this situation. If it worked, great. If not, the worst I'd lose was a few sharp words worth it to see him cornered. Not long after signing the divorce settlement, Miranda Vaughn and Grayson were photographed strolling hand in hand. They couldn't even wait until they'd picked up the official divorce certificate. To make it worse, Evan was in some of those photos. Miranda, long known online as a minimalist lifestyle goddess, often curated a glamorous, elegant image on social media with a devoted fan base swooning over her posts. She carried the title of a foreign-educated artist, a talented muse surrounded by endless praise. But once those videos surfaced, the online chatter turned chaotic. Some speculated she had secretly married and had a child with a wealthy man years ago. Others doubted Evan was her biological son, suspecting instead that he was from a previous marriage. Her fans fought back aggressively, flooding the comments to defend her. "What's wrong with the divorce? Is it costing you anything?" they argued. "Have you ever seen a stepchild this close to their stepmother?" That proves Miranda's a good person. Kids only love people who treat them well. The pressure was enough to make the original poster delete their account. But public opinion shifted again when a popular blogger revealed the truth. Miranda had been the other woman who destroyed her own younger sister's marriage, and she'd even taken the child. The story spread like wildfire, and the messy love triangle between me, Grayson, and Miranda became the talk of every gossip feed. I stayed silent, letting time expose them piece by piece. Those leaks didn't happen by accident. They were carefully planted by Sienna and me. Eventually, my mother, Loretta Pierce, showed up after returning from a long vacation, as if she'd suddenly remembered she still had another daughter. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. "Natalie, your sister didn't mean it. Hasn't she and Grayson compensated you enough already? You can't hold on to someone who doesn't love you. Let go, sweetheart." "Let go," I said, my voice ice cold. "I already divorced him, didn't I? I've stepped aside for your precious eldest daughter. What more do you want me to let go of? But now your sister's being criticized everywhere. Don't you feel the slightest bit of sympathy?" "Sympathy?" I laughed. "I'm not heartless, Mother. In fact, I feel delighted. Natalie, do you really have to be this way? Blaming everything on your sister won't change a thing. With your looks and education, if it hadn't been her, Grayson would have cheated with someone else anyway. Must you force everyone into a corner just to feel satisfied? I'm begging you, say something to defend your sister." And then she knelt in front of me. I stared at her tear-streaked face, my lips curling into a cold smile. "Is kneeling some kind of precious gesture to you? If all it took was kneeling for me to erase you from my life, I'd kneel to the heavens every single day." "Natalie," she looked at me in disbelief, clutching her head like she'd been struck. "I'm your mother. I had no choice." "No choice," I shot back, my voice rising. "Or did you just want to stand by and watch your darling eldest die? Tell me, who exactly are you the mother of? You've always been Miranda's mother, not mine. You're afraid she might die, but you've never been afraid I might. And you dare bring up my education? You think I should be ashamed? Do you not remember why I dropped out? Have you forgotten already that year you knelt just like this, using shame and guilt to force me to give up my dreams, to sacrifice my life for your beloved eldest daughter? You walked over my back, drained me dry so she could thrive, and now you have the nerve to call me mediocre." Every word was a blade slicing through the air, my anger burning so hot it lit the space between us. "Natalie, are you still holding a grudge against me? What could I have done? My heart aches like it's being crushed. I didn't want things to turn out this way. You're a mother now, too. Can't you try to understand me?" I let out a cold laugh. They say the palm and the back of the hand are both flesh, but some people's palms are thick with it, and the back of their hands are thin. You're different. You're deformed. The back of your hand is nothing but bone and thorns, while all the flesh is piled in your palm. Natalie, she stammered, unable to find words. No way out, huh? An adult like you had no way out. But somehow you expected a 15-year-old kid to figure it out. You exploited my love, my respect, and my pity for you, just to shove me in front of the firing line. You could have gone out and worked to support yourself, but you didn't. You were afraid. You hid. And you threw me out there to take the hit for you. It's because I'm a mother now that I finally see you never loved me. You don't deserve to be called a mother, so what do you want me to do, die, so you can feel better? Is that it? Would you finally let everyone go if I killed myself? She cried, rushing toward the window. My apartment was on the 10th floor. One jump and she'd be gone. I didn't move to stop her. I just sat on the sofa and watched coldly. She dragged a chair over, climbed up, sobbing and wailing, but she didn't jump. Finally, she turned around to accuse me. You're really this cruel. You just let your own mother die in front of you. I stood up, walked over slowly, and grabbed her arm, screaming in a voice scraped raw by years of pain. Do it, jump. Why don't you jump? Why are you my mother at all? If you only ever loved Miranda, why did you even give birth to me? You blame me for not keeping Dad, for not being born a boy. Why don't you blame yourself for being weak, for clinging to a worthless man, Natalie? I'm your mother. Don't you fear hell for treating me like this? She climbed down from the chair, trembling. Hell, from the moment I came out of your womb, I've already been there. My voice was ice. You knew about Miranda and Grayson long ago, didn't you? You knew I was pushed so far. I lost my baby, didn't you? And yet you only showed up when your precious eldest got exposed and dragged through the mud online. What exactly do you think I am to you? You're blaming me. Are you saying all of this is my fault? It's not blame, it's hatred. I said, my voice steady but lethal. I hate you so much I could carve you apart piece by piece. Don't come looking for me again. I don't see you as my mother anymore. I won't give you a cent, and I won't lift a finger for you. I called building security to escort her out. She muttered the same tired line as always. Blood is thicker than water. Sisters are like broken bones that still knit together. I didn't answer. I just stood there watching her leave, my heart utterly unmoved. When the scandal online had spread so far it couldn't be contained, I decided to speak out this time, revealing Miranda Vaughn's name. I accused her of sleeping with my husband and destroying my marriage, along with a string of other offenses, including cheating on her university entrance exam years ago to gain extra admission points. Now, Miranda wasn't just the minimalist lifestyle goddess, she was also a university lecturer. Sienna and I had planned this carefully. What we had so far would ruin her online career, but she could still cling to that fraudulently earned degree to land a comfortable job. That thought made my blood boil. My life had been reduced to ashes. Why should the people who destroyed me get to live in peace? I returned to the small village where we'd grown up and visited my old school. Painful memories came flooding back, especially the day I was tricked into leaving school to work in a factory. The memory cut like a blade through my chest. I remembered that in my second year working there, Loretta came to me asking for a huge sum of money. I gave her everything I had. She even threatened suicide drinking pesticide and ending up in the ER for stomach pumping. I had no choice but to borrow from everyone I knew until I scraped together enough for her. Later, I learned the truth: she'd used that money to bribe for Miranda's second-class swimming certificate. Miranda could barely swim the basic strokes. How could she have passed the real exam that year? So much happened all at once that I was too exhausted to think deeper. But now looking back, I realize Miranda Vaughn's entire life has been an unbroken chain of cheating and deceit. I didn't just go public with her name. I dropped every shred of evidence I'd collected. The backlash was brutal. Miranda deleted all her social media accounts, and the university where she taught issued an official statement firing her. One day, I got a text from an unknown number. Satisfied now, Natalie Pierce. Let me tell you, none of this mattered. Even without it, I still would have taken everything from you. I'm marrying Grayson Vaughn and I have your son. He calls me mom every single day now. You can scream and lose your mind all you want. It won't change a thing. Everything. If it wasn't mine, then it sure as hell wouldn't belong to anyone else. I'd burn it all down first. I threw myself into work, showing up at the company almost every day. 2 weeks after going public with the accusations against Miranda, my divorce certificate arrived. Grayson came to see me. "You destroyed us like this." "Does it make you happy?" I smiled faintly. "Happy? How could I be happy?" "Then why, Natalie? Why make all of us suffer like this? I'll be happy when I see you both living lives worse than death. But you're still here breathing, walking around with teeth in your mouth. How can I possibly be happy yet you?" For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. He took 2 steps back before leaving in a rush, so fragile inside yet capable of such cruelty. Didn't he realize only someone who'd shared his bed could land the most precise, devastating blows? Grayson was all about pride and image. Now, thanks to my quiet maneuvering, everyone at the company, from the board to the junior staff, was whispering behind his back. I even leaked a bit of his personal info online. One morning, while driving to work, someone hurled a rotten egg at his car. On the conference room table, someone scrawled in red marker, "Adulterer, marriage scammer, deserves no peace in death." He tried to find out who did it, but conveniently the security cameras had been broken. At the start, Grayson and I owned equal shares in the company, but a chess piece I'd set in place years earlier finally moved. One of our lead engineers had once been a scholarship recipient from a fund I'd sponsored while she was in school. I dropped out of college because of money troubles. I wasn't about to let others go through the same. After the scandal, she decided to sell all her shares to me at a generous discount so she could focus on grad school. We closed the deal quickly. With my stake increased and their reputations destroyed, Grayson's voice in meetings grew weaker and weaker. Everything he proposed was shot down. Eventually, he couldn't take the humiliation and sold off the rest of his shares at a loss, walking away from the company. But Miranda had lived too long in luxury to stomach a frugal life. It wasn't long before Grayson had to try starting a new business from scratch. In today's transparent world, launching something new isn't easy, especially for someone like him. He had the technical skills, sure, but all the business strategies in our old life had been mine. Back then, I'd driven to follow supplier trucks to find cheaper raw materials. I'd taken part-time work at a courier center just to track competitors' shipping addresses. Those were long, grinding days. I'd come home so tired I could barely stand. Once I got back late at night to find Grayson rushing toward me, eyes red like he'd been crying. I pushed him off, startled. It turned out he hadn't been able to reach me. My phone had been off and the news had just reported a massive landslide along the road. I took crushing cars into the ravine. He'd held my face in his hands back then and choked out, "I'll try harder. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure our family lives well. Just don't overwork yourself. Stay safe for me." But in the end, our relationship had been rotting from the inside since the very beginning. Those hidden grudges gnawing at us wrapped up in a gorgeous cloak. Once I ripped it open, the truth made me tremble to my core. So when Grayson tried to rebuild, of course I was going to help. I knew Miranda Vaughn still kept tabs on me. Even though I'd blocked her everywhere, someone kept feeding her details about my daily life. When that person told me, I just said flatly, "Keep sending it to her." Because jealousy, that gnawing sense of injustice and deep-seated insecurity, that is the truest hell a person can live in. So I began appearing regularly in high-end boutiques, shopping without restraint. The handbags and jewelry Miranda once flaunted, I bought more and pricier. I took frequent trips to Dubai and made sure to let slip that I was about to sign new contracts, massive deals that would bring in staggering profits. People think Dubai is a glittering gold paradise, where fortunes appear the moment you set foot there. Behind the glamour is a harsh, unforgiving reality. For ordinary people, just surviving in that city is a struggle. And there the scams are more elaborate than anywhere else. Surrounded by endless desert, if you're lured there, escape is nearly impossible. Under constant pressure from his endless fights with Miranda Grayson, Vaughn finally boarded a plane to Dubai, hoping for a shot at a fresh start. What awaited him was no stroke of luck, it was a con that gutted him. He lost every cent and nearly his life. He came back alive, but the price was a leg amputated. Without money, love doesn't survive. Miranda's heart shifted quickly. One morning, she packed up everything and vanished, taking what little cash was left in the house. Grayson tried to hang on, but a middle-aged man missing a leg isn't exactly in demand. Eventually, he had no choice but to take a factory job. By the time he thought about finding me, Sienna Harper and I were already in Switzerland, continuing our studies. For so long, I'd only thought of myself as my mother's daughter, as Evan Vaughn's mother, as Grayson Vaughn's wife. I'd almost forgotten who I really was. Before leaving, I gave Mrs. Whitaker a large sum to live comfortably. She wasn't my blood, but she treated me better than anyone in my family ever had. Even in Switzerland, packages from her would arrive inside delicacies she'd made herself, like cold rabbit and chilled beef. Sienna and I were always touched. Neither of us could cook like that. As for Evan, before I left, I set aside just enough money to sustain him until he turned 18. It wasn't enough for the lavish life he was used to, but it would keep him from going hungry. I heard that after Grayson came back to the country, he cut Evan's horseback riding lessons. But Evan didn't listen. He insisted on riding his little red horse. The animal spooked, threw him off, and just like the lies his father once spun to manipulate me, he broke his arm in the fall. Somehow he found a phone and called me sobbing, begging me to come back. He told me his grandmother and father had said Aunt Miranda needed protecting, so he'd done it for her. So his mother, me, came second. I didn't argue. I just said coldly, "Evan, people have to take responsibility for their actions. The whip you used that day killed 2 of my children. Now isn't this exactly what you wanted? I'm no longer your mother." Then I hung up, ignoring his cries, and blocked his number. After finishing my studies, I traveled for a while before returning home with Sienna to start fresh. I'd already sold my old company. Now we built a new one from the ground up. Busy as I was, my life felt full and meaningful. One day, scrolling online, I came across a video. It showed a teenage boy beating his own father, shouting that the man had ruined his life. At first, I was just shocked. Then the image of Evan years ago, whip in hand, striking me, flashed in my mind, and my chest tightened. By the end of the video, I saw the father's face clearly. It was Grayson Vaughn. The irony was almost too perfect. This was karma, plain and simple. The seeds he'd sown had finally come to harvest. He'd raised and enabled his son to disrespect and abuse the woman who gave birth to him. Now he was the one taking the blows. So he thought that being a father meant he could just walk through life untouched. Years ago, before I left for good, I had gone back to my old school, the place where I was forced to drop out. Back then, my literature teacher, Ms. Franklin, had done everything she could to stop me from quitting. She even offered to help me financially if that was the problem. In school, my grades overall were average, but my writing was exceptional. In truth, I hadn't always been average. Early on, I was in the top 5 of my class. But over time, my mother kept piling more and more responsibilities on me. Every day I was so busy I could barely breathe, and my grades slipped. She told me I just wasn't cut out for academics, that I shouldn't push myself. I believed her, and so I crossed that line and let go of my dream to study. This time, returning to school, I brought a bouquet of flowers for Ms. Franklin. We had lunch and talked about life. After the meal, while walking together, she suddenly took my hand, her eyes full of care, and said, "You've endured so much over the years." My eyes burned immediately, and before the tears could fall, I turned away. When I took her back to the school, she told me to wait downstairs. A few minutes later, she returned with a fountain pen, a gift for me. She said she still remembered my essays, how much life they had in them. I had once owned a fountain pen I loved dearly, a prize from a writing contest, and I took great care of it. But before I left school, it had broken. Back then, Ms. Franklin had wanted to buy me a replacement, but for one reason or another, the gift never reached me until now. When I opened the elegant pen case at home, I saw an inscription on the barrel, "The past cannot be changed, but the future can." And it was true. No matter what, it's never too late. I used that pen to write my first story, hoping my words would reach girls like me. Love yourself first, because only then will you have the strength to truly love others. I didn't hear news about my mother for many years after that. Miranda Vaughn, still chasing her habit of slipping into other people's marriages, had finally tangled with someone who wasn't easy to handle. She was beaten so badly she disappeared from the public eye. When life was comfortable, I had been the one holding everything together, allowing them to maintain the appearance of a loving, respectable family. But stripped back to nothing without me as their lifeline, they turned on each other. Miranda cut off contact with my mother entirely, leaving her to fend for herself. Aging ill and with no one to care for her, my mother eventually wound up homeless. The authorities placed her in a nursing home. The staff couldn't reach Miranda, so they contacted me. They said she wanted to see me, but I refused. Still, to avoid burdening anyone else, I paid her nursing home expenses every month. As her condition worsened, her request to see me increased. But I never went. When the home told me she'd gone on a hunger strike, I answered coolly, "Let her do what she wants. I would pay as long as she lived, and when she died, I would handle her cremation." She lasted a few more days before taking her final breath late one night. I arranged her cremation and had her ashes buried in our hometown. Along with her, I buried the first half of my life, every ounce of resentment, pain, and humiliation. I only wish that if there was another life, we would never cross paths again. On the drive back, the sunset painted the entire sky in gold and crimson, the breeze brushing across my face like a gentle hand. I looked into the mirror, meeting my own eyes, and told myself firmly, "It's okay. I can love myself. I can cherish myself. This life will be lived for me." In the back seat were stacks of my newly published books waiting for my signature. At last I had found the woman I'd lost long ago, the one I should have been all along.